What does life hold for philosophy majors? I decided to find out. Welcome to Life After Philosophy. I'm Christopher Anadale. Welcome to Life After Philosophy. My guest today is David McGinley. He is a 2011 graduate of Mount St. Mary's University. He is a CPA and a certified financial planner. He's also a cancer survivor and the brother of Stephen McGinley, the farmer whom I interviewed earlier on this podcast. He is married and the father of two children. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
I wanted to talk with you because of the interesting life story you have, and I think the depth of your experience and reflections on philosophy that have come out of your, not just your work, your status as a father and your work in accounting, but also your struggle with cancer. Is that something we could start by talking about now?
Absolutely. So last February of 2023, I discovered a lump and was, of course, alarmed and didn't know what was going on. I struggled with testicular cancer, and so that noticed a change and went to see my primary care doctor, and then wound up getting her brother had gone through testicular cancer. So she immediately sort of went down to help alleviate some fear that her brother is doing very well, is now in his 50s, survived the cancer, etc. And that testicular cancer is a very successful rate of being treated. That said, obviously, any diagnosis of cancer still will elucidate fear out of a person, or most people. Certainly it did out of me. Then I went to a urologist and was seen. We then got tested with sonograms, etc., confirmed that there was a mass, and had an orchiectomy in late February. And the hope was that that would have cured the cancer in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, the cancer had spread, so everything appeared to be clear. We did scans in March, and there was nothing residual in the CT scan. There was nothing in the blood work that caused alarm. And the slides, when they took the tumor out, well, the testicle, and just cut it up and examined it under a microscope, the radiologist identified it as 100% teratoma type cancer. So the doctor said, if it's 100% teratoma, we should be generally okay. I wouldn't recommend doing chemo just to do it. If this is your fact pattern, chemo is obviously rough. So we just sort of took a wait and see approach. So we waited, and then in June, I started noticing that my breasts had gotten harder, this like something growing in my breast tissue. And I mean that specifically, not just the chest area, but the actual breast area. And it was an odd sensation. And so I was nervous that I was somehow developing breast cancer, which my sister's friend actually just went through as a man, getting breast cancer and having a very difficult struggle with that.
Wow.
Nonetheless, so I called a doctor, the oncologist. There was some unfortunate miscommunication. The urologist office faxed my data to the oncologist office, and I was waiting for a phone call from the oncologist office to be seen. And then when I called the oncologist in June, they said they never had received any information from the urologist. And that was, somewhat upsetting. But errors happen. People, when we deal with humans, errors can just happen. So I get that. And so we just had to deal with the reality as it is presented to us. And from there, I have a very good friend from kindergarten who is a doctor, an excellent cardiologist in the Cleveland Clinic, who is a wonderful man, good father, and excels at this. And he found me a contact at Johns Hopkins. So I was able to see a doctor, an oncologist at Johns Hopkins. I also saw an oncologist locally, and we were going to do, he had suggested that we do a biopsy of oh, well, I'm skipping ahead here, I guess. So we did a CT scan, and there was a tumor in my lower back lymph node area. So he was suggesting that we do a biopsy. I had the biopsy scheduled for, I believe, July 23rd, 2023, something like that. And the Hopkins doctor could only see me that day or the next week. And my cardiologist friend, thankfully, providentially, pushed me to see the oncologist first and move the biopsy. And we had already started praying for miraculous healing, because my brother Stephen, whom you interviewed, as you said, went through non-Hodgkin's lymphoma when he had just graduated college, had just been married, and his wife was pregnant with my nephew. And that was an absolutely terrible experience, a huge challenge, made personally, not that it affects me anywhere close to him, but it was emotionally upsetting because I happened to be in Ireland studying abroad when he was diagnosed with that and going through that. And it felt terrible to have him going through that with not being able to help at all.
Yeah. Were you in pain at this time? Was that distorting your day, or was it just a medical thing you had to attend to while going about the rest of your daily affairs in life?
So there was not pain involved at this point, thankfully. So nothing was pressing against a nerve then. It did later develop into a pain in my lower back that became quite sharp, but at first there was nothing going on. So what had happened was I was developing this testicular cancer, unbeknownst to me, because of course I hadn't researched it. But one of the tests that's done for, there are a variety of types of it. One of the tests that's done is a blood test, and one of the tumor markers is called beta HCG, and that is also a pregnancy hormone test that they do. So I guess whatever, the hormones go awry because it is messing up with your general hormone system, I suppose. And so my numbers were, when we first did the blood test in March, the number was 27, if I recall correctly. It's supposed to be below 5, but the doctors told me that that wouldn't have caused them alarm at 27. By the time I got tested in July, or blood drawn late June, got the results July 5th, that number was 27,000.
27,000?
Yeah, so certainly that made me think that seems like a high number. So by the time I saw the oncologist in Hopkins, he had told me that it then grew again. I got tested right before seeing him, and it was now 39,000, I think. So he said that puts me at stage 3B cancer because of that number.
Yikes.
He's I guess I can say his name on this, Dr. Noah Hahn. He helped save my life, and he's a wonderful doctor, world premier expert in this down at Hopkins. He also is an expert in other cancers as well. Because again, unbeknownst to me, apparently testicular cancer, despite being known, is actually not common enough that when you're trying to schedule an appointment at Hopkins online, it's not even on the list of cancers. You have to select the other box. So despite Lance Armstrong having it, apparently it's not popular enough to be on that list. So who knew? So anywho, so he was so suddenly life moved really quick. So I was very processing a lot of things emotionally, especially with my wife over the July 4th. We generally get together with our extended family on my mother's side for July 4th. There's like 40 of us that get together
Mhm.
for a few days down in the Shenandoah Valley. And I was waiting on results, and I had to leave early to get up to see the oncologist in town, and then got the blood results the next day. So it was definitely damper on that sort of fun, uh, and just working to process it. The the diagnosis is definitely frightening, but always optimistic, because I do know God can throw us things that He can't handle and give us the strength to handle, and that even if on Earth it can't be solved, the whole point is that this isn't the end game, and not that I at all wanted to die, want to die. Particularly, I do not want to leave my wife and children, but um, that is the only ultimate saving grace, and then the power of prayer.
So was the 27,000, 39,000 test the sort of threshold that really accelerated things? Was there a second cancer, or cancer had spread in fact, and you would need a more comprehensive treatment? Is that about when things really started to go?
Well, so he was very much, you need to start chemotherapy uh, as soon as possible.
Mhm.
So suddenly, yeah, seeing him July 23rd, I rapidly got seen by a surgeon, had a port put in to my chest, and then had to get all my affairs at work in order so that my coworkers could take care of things. And then by July 31st, I started chemo.
I was going to ask about at what point did life stop being any semblance of normal? And it sounds like this is the point at which this is kind of your full-time affair, commanding all of your attention, including all your worry about your family and your wife and the job. So where did things go from there? What was that like?
Yeah, it was very distressing, not least of which is because my wife and I, who had lost our first child, had our little boy was then born in 2022 early, and then we were expecting a baby that we were thrilled to be blessed with, whose due date was August of 2023. So
Oh,
this was about as bad of timing, in my view, as we could get. So it was a big challenge. So July 31st, we started chemo, and again was very optimistic. We were praying, and we have a wonderful network of support. Both sides of my family, my in-laws are wonderful. I'm so blessed that they're in my life. They very generously. My father-in-law is retired. He was an excellent air traffic controller, and they forced retirement at age 56, if I recall correctly. So even though he's younger than my parents, he and his wife, my mother-in-law, were able to live with us for months and be helpful. And that was just such a blessing I can't even describe. We would not have gotten through that without them. And that really allowed me to know that my wife was taken care of, and my mother and father were able to help me get through this. My mother came with me to virtually every chemo session. I had friends come from afar that I've known again for years. One all the way from Portland was here and came with me for a session to be with me, and that was such a comfort at that time.
wow, yeah, that's amazing. It's great to hear of the support and the turn towards faith that helped get you through this. And this is all, as we're recording this, this is less than 13 months ago that you're talking about all this really beginning in earnest.
Yes, yeah. This this fall is going a lot better. This late summer and fall is a lot better than 12 months ago. So we're, yeah, just so grateful to be yeah, now out of it.
Let me turn the conversation towards philosophy, one of the themes of the podcast. What was your consolation during this time, either when the medical work was bad or when you were recovering? I understand you did some reading, you did some reflecting on not just so your own situation of mortality, but on in the history of philosophy. What was important to you in that time?
Yeah, so focusing on what so first of all, having a focus, knowing in life that there is truth, the starting point, knowing that we can be assured that reality is, and it's not something that's fungible, and it's also something that's approachable. So philosophy, so just a little backstory. So I transferred to the Mount, and I part of the reason I transferred was because I was down at a public university in Virginia, and it was a good school, and I knew good people down there. But as a secular university, there was something palpably missing in the atmosphere, and it was definitely noticeable to me because I grew up. I'm a cradle Catholic. I was blessed to have a priest teach me catechesis in middle school. Very much took to philosophy and theology that early. Um, read it on my own, read it on my own, just to continue to grow, and have always been interested in deeper truths, coming to the truth. Because as Jesus said, the truth will set you free, and ultimately, obviously, He is the truth who sets us free.
Was there a philosophical element? You mentioned knowing truth, knowing that truth is accessible, knowing that reality is, and these all sound kind of like foundational philosophical truths that a theological understanding would be built on the basis of. Did you go any further in any particular philosophical direction with Saint Augustine or anyone else like that?
Not a particular person, no. Just in general, trying to focus on prayer, focus on the belief that if God wanted it, a miraculous healing would be possible, and that if God wanted it, I don't have to have a miraculous healing. So the in at some level indifference to that, stemming from the understanding of what is the purpose of man. So what is the function of anything, and what is my function is to know, love, and serve God in this life, and to be with Him forever in the next. And at the end of the day, that core belief can lead to a abiding sense of peace in struggle, even amidst literally suffering and struggling.
Do you think by the point that this was all happening, your liberal arts education had made a difference in the kind of person you were approaching this? If you had been a man who was just as faithful, but with a different educational background, would it have been more challenging for you?
Yes, I think that the philosophy instruction helps you to grasp, to take the realities of life and evaluate them in a more meaningful way, so that it's not simply that how to put this in the right way. It's not simply about holding a belief without a foundation to such a belief. Because I certainly, obviously, am not a direct witness to any of the realities of the gospel. But through my philosophical education, through evaluating, first of all, through reading very intelligent people have different opinions on what reality is, understandings. David Hume understands the universe very differently than the universe is actually. And so being challenged in that, in my understanding of what the universe is and what the classical understanding of what the universe is, uh, solidified for me, did not raise what they proposed was evaluated and it was found wanting. So their arguments were not sound. Their premises were wrong, particularly things that stand out. Descartes, the going through the rabbit hole of whether we're asleep or awake,
Right.
and going down that. Well, at the end of the day, he has to admit to the reader when you get to the end of the book that, yeah, actually, there are ways you can know whether you're asleep or awake. So you literally pull the rug out of that immediately. And but it is very well written and makes you think. And then you have to get to, no, actually, there are, you can know whether you're in the matrix or not in the matrix. And you can trust your senses to a real degree. And you can evaluate that due to the beauty of the created universe. There is some thinking thing who created such beauty that can't, it is far more likely that that is the case than that at the end of the day, this is some random assortment of material reality. And most fundamentally, that pretty much all of St. Thomas Aquinas's arguments of the reality of God come fundamentally back to the question of how can something exist from nothing? And at the end of the day, that is the baseline question we all must answer. And if you reject the idea that something can come from nothing because that is just highly illogical, then you have to accept something must exist that's eternal. And then you really start down the path of read all the philosophy you want, absolutely be exposed to ideas, Plato's forms, etc. But what bears the most resemblance to experienced reality that is actually right in front of you? Everyone's looking for something empirical. It is actually right in front of your eyes if you're willing to accept it and be open to it.
Sounds like an insight from G.K. Chesterton, right? To go on a journey around the world to wind up back in your own front yard. That is the most amazing place where the truth has always been.
Yeah, and I was one thing that definitely particularly struck me reading The City of God by St. Augustine is when he points out that if it weren't right in front of us, we would realize that creation itself is absolutely the most amazing miracle ever, but we just take it for granted. And you do take it for granted, and we all take health for granted, actually, or most of us, I certainly do, or did. And having it taken from you is definitely challenging.
Yeah, I wanted to ask how you feel you've been changed by the whole experience. I mean, I'm sure it is, a life-altering change and one that causes you to think very deeply about your own mortality, your possible end, the fate of your children you mentioned. Oh, what does that look like now, 13 months on and into, as I understand, remission? How are you a different David at this point?
Um, I definitely appreciate moments all the more. I did appreciate moments for sure. Again, due to my education and thinking, always knew life is ephemeral and can be taken from you at any moment. The intellect can get you there. And I'm also a Knight of Columbus, and Tempus Fugit Memento Mori. You know that life is brief,
Yep.
and death comes to all, and we have to think of that. But a next step. It's not that living it is quote unquote fundamentally different, because I think that's the whole point of the human intellect. You are able to think and try and place yourself into situations. But I would sort of phrase it more as it is still an enhanced experience to live through it and uh, face opportunities that truly are life-threatening in fact, not simply in thought.
Yeah, I see just what you mean. Boy, I can't for myself imagine going through that kind of experience, though I'm sure if I had to, I would. I want to, at towards the end of our time here, ask you a version of the last question of the show about the kind of advice you'd give to students. And rather than dwelling on advice for philosophy majors, I wonder what you would say now from your perspective with what you know now and who you are now, what you might say to someone who's in a situation similar to yours back before you transferred, somebody who's maybe at a secular university and feeling something lacking, or someone who's pursuing a course of study and wondering if there's not something more in the liberal arts, even though they can't really quantify it. Is there any advice you could give to them drawing upon what you've learned that they might find helpful?
Yeah, that fulfillment definitely does not come through material things, nor achievement, nor honor. And while those things can be good in themselves, if you are already feeling like there is something lacking in your life, there's only one way to get at that, and that is to study philosophy, see where it leads you, and God willing, I would say, grow in your relationship with God, who is the ultimate fulfillment of that. But the gift of philosophy and the gift of reason to mankind is such a gift that along that journey you can get closer and closer to him through the reasoned pursuit of truth in stepwise fashion. And of course, all the while, he is actually the one who is constantly pursuing you. And the Mount can give you both of those things, that you have wonderful professors helping you learn from amazing men who wrote centuries ago. And at the same time, you have access to Jesus Christ in the Eucharist, in tabernacles all over the campus. Also, in our fellow students, where two or three are gathered in my name, there I am present. You have community to grow in faith at your speed and keep pursuing that sense of fulfillment, with which ultimately brings about a joy that cannot be taken away, no matter what hardship comes.
It's a beautiful testimony and a great place for us to end, David. Thank you very much. My guest today has been David McGinley, husband, father, CPA, and cancer survivor. Thanks again, David, for being on Life After Philosophy.
My pleasure, Chris, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Life After Philosophy. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate it 5 stars and share this episode with a friend. I appreciate your support.